Welcome back to Operator Syndrome. I'm Patrick here with Steve, and we're talking about Ranger training, Ranger selection. We left off, I was in RIP. I don't know what week in RIP. It's all a blur now. But Steve had a question he wanted to lead off with.
Yeah, this is one of the fascinating things to me. I hope it's even remotely interesting to others listening, but the cultural differences. And I have to say, I mentioned this to Patrick at some point. I have no idea if it's on any recording. Um, that I honestly think I might have done better. I might have had a better military track. And when I say that, I had a great one as a SEAL. I mean, I don't have any, it was a great it was fulfilling for me, but I almost think I would have done better in an army track of some special operator mode, because I'm super organized as a person. I don't like clutter. I like to be like everything's in its place, and SEALs are like the most slapdash bunch when it comes to that. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do necessarily with getting a job done. I mean, it could potentially, but mostly it's just we're just like like herding cats. Like we're just a bunch of free thinking wild guys out there. So I had this one story, and I wanted to, because Patrick's talking about the RIP process and what it and further Ranger school and all that. We had a thing in second phase, which for my time was land warfare, where we went to this place called Camp Elliott, and it was only like 3 nights out in the field. I mean, we were learning patrol. We were doing a lot of patrolling, fire and movement, stuff like that, and it was a Navy base, I think, connected with Miramar Naval Air Station. Now, Miramar, for those of the 80s generation, that's Top Gun school. That's where Tom Cruise went with his cool crotch rocket and flew planes. Since then, they've moved it. It's a Marine Air Station now. I don't even know where Top Gun school is anymore. But anyway, back then, that's where it was. And usually in San Diego, and this was probably, it must have been, oh, I know when it was. It was December, because we went on Christmas leave right when this was over. We were allowed to go, home and whatever. So we all knew we were going to have to hump a long way. I don't remember how long it was, but it's one of those. So as SEALs, and see, this is where I'm going to throw it to Patrick, because I bet you Rangers, I almost know it. Probably nobody in the entire Army would do this. We're trying to look for ways to cut corners, right? Because that's what we do. So we're thinking, how do I lighten my load? And I was carrying the radio. It was this big old Vietnam era. We called it the Prick 77, PRC 77. I mean, it weighed about as much as a computer printer. I mean, it was ridiculous. And that was part of it. So I was the radio man. So I was, I had to carry this honking radio. So it's like, oh, hey, how do we lighten our loads, guys? Let's compile gear. Let's spread gear out. The 60 gunner. So we would all carry a belt of 100 rounds of 60 ammo, which is 7.62, to lighten his load. So somebody came up with a brilliant idea. Hey, we got to have watch all night, because we're going to be in a, we're traveling in a squad level, basically, boat crew level. Eight of us, 6 of us, or 8 of us, I can't remember. And so they said, all right, so let's say there was 8 of us, I think, something like that. So 4 have got to be on watch all night, and then the other 4 get to sleep, and we shift. So let's just bring 4 sleeping bags instead of 8. And we're thinking, okay, yeah, that lightens the load a little. So I didn't have to carry a sleeping bag because I was a radio man. Okay, so we get to Camp Elliott. We get there, and it was record cold. It was below freezing that night. I mean, record cold for San Diego. I mean, and it can get that way, but it was a freak of nature, because I talked Mike Bailey, my buddy who was in a platoon, was one of the instructors on this evolution, and he said, man, we couldn't believe it. We were instructors, and we were going in like campers and going, holy crap, those guys got to be freezing out there. It was literally freezing. I mean, the next morning, to make us get wet, we had to break ice in the puddles and roll in it to get wet and sandy, because that's all part of it. So in the middle of the night, I'm standing watch first, and I am freezing. Did we have gloves? No. Did we have? We had a field jacket, like a Vietnam era field jacket on.
Nice.
No liner, because we thought it was going to be warm. I to say that we could have come close to dying of exposure is no understatement. It was so cold. So these guys are sleeping with their bags, and I'm like, okay, it's my time to sleep. And I woke the dude up, names aside. I said, hey man, time for watch. I need your sleeping bag. I'm freezing. He's like, screw you, man. It's freezing. I was like, you got to be kidding me, dude. What? My buddy, this is the deal. And he's like, it's too cold, man. I don't want to get out of this thing. And so we went around, like several guys were like, man, screw that. I'm keeping my sleeping bag. I humped it. And me and the point man, we just huddled up like a three dog night, man. I mean, we were so cold. We just bundled up together. But I'm just thinking, going back to this, Rangers had all their rucks organized. Everything's in its place. You would never leave any piece of, you'd probably get pounded if you were missing a piece of gear. But I always kind of, and when I saw the Rangers at sniper school and the special forces guys, they were always much more squared away when it came to everything in its place. And you didn't just wing it. And I always felt like we were kind of winging it. Although, I'm not. So, Patrick, so reflect on that, man, and get back to.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, this is a good deep dive into the subcultures with something like packing lists. The first thing I'll say is, I think in the Army in general, but definitely in the Rangers, there are no higher sins than being a chow thief, someone who steals food or um, rifles through MREs to pick out what they like, and then folks who fall asleep, folks who fall asleep when it's their turn to be on watch. You know, the Rangers, and if for some reason there were less sleeping bags, the Rangers' answer is not screw you, go away. It's like, get in here, dude.
Yeah,
Let's double up.
yeah,
And I've done that. I've cuddled with other men on at Cole Range and pre-Ranger when I would have to go back later before Ranger school. We were all a big pile of dudes cuddling with each other in the middle of this
yeah,
field. So there's definitely a one culture thing that's just unacceptable. No, screw you. I'm gonna keep my bag. I can understand it, but that's not
yeah.
allowed. You can't do that.
Right.
So in terms of like packing lists and those type of things, yeah, I think again, my experience at my time, and to some extent, I hope it remains true to this day, is on some level is the Rangers are always over prepared, always, because when we're not, it never works out for us. It's part of our history, if you think back to Black Hawk Down. We don't need back plates. We don't we don't need this. We don't need our nods. uh,
Mm-hmm.
we do truly learn those lessons, and it gets passed down. You're going on a daytime raid, doesn't matter, take your nods with you. you know
Yeah.
you're climbing at altitude. You're doing a mission at altitude up in those mountains, trying to decide, do we really drop our plates? Do we really do this? Does the speed offer that trade-off? So those are hard decisions to make. Rangers in general, we probably carry more than we need to, always. um, and we have backups. We have backups for things. So yeah, in my and it goes back to the general culture around standardization, and standards, and everyone being the same and everyone having the same things. A team leader is going to check his foe. A team leader will never take the word of one of their subordinates that they have their stuff. We do layouts before you
Right.
go out on a mission or an op or whatever. As a team leader, I'm gonna put my hands, on the stuff you're supposed to carry. Do you have your SSE bag? Do you have your bump cards? Do you have your this? Do you have your that? You're going to actually look at it, even if
Right.
they're a tab. And
Right.
there's a sort of bifurcation in the Ranger units between those who have gone to Ranger school. Again, how I'm saying that you've fully completed that selection process to an extent versus the privates. And a private is anyone who hasn't come back from Ranger school yet. So even a tab though, you know, if you're still going to go and you're going to check them out, you're going to put your hands on
Yeah.
that stuff and check. So culturally, it is definitely about making sure you have everything. And in the Ranger Regiment, weight has never been an excuse or a reason for not carrying something. There could be other valid reasons, but just because your bag gets heavy, and that's an Army thing, and I can tell. You look at the other units, nobody, no, maybe the Marines do, I think maybe,
Yeah.
although I haven't spent that much time with them, but in the Army for sure, like unless you're unless your ruck is literally ripping from the
Right.
weight or things are spilling out, like weight is not an excuse not to carry
Right.
something.
Right.
And there are plenty of times where I'm like, this is ridiculous. It
Right.
is absolutely ridiculous that we're carrying all this stuff. But it goes back to that mindset where in our history we've been burned because
Yeah.
we didn't have enough sleeping bags, or we didn't have enough ammo, or we didn't have enough water, or this or that. And then it goes on and you carry a bunch of stuff with you. So
Yeah.
yeah, that would definitely be a difference in how we approach things.
Yeah.
Um,
So tell me something as you get into, for those listening who may not know this, there are two tabs that a ranger might see on a ranger's uniform, and I actually, this is why I'm asking, because I don't know I mean, I know kind of the difference. One is a simple tab with yellow Ranger, and it's an arc that just says Ranger. It goes like this, like, and then there's a bigger tab that says, it's like subdued, it's like green and black, and it says something like Ranger Regiment, blah 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 blah. I don't know. What are the two differences of those tabs?
um, yeah, I'm looking for something that has it on there. And I have something, but it's this massive plaque. So,
Yeah.
but it's what you're describing is the Ranger tab, as you
Well,
like you said. Yeah,
it looks kind of like
exactly. It
that.
looks like that. It's see you see like when someone is infatuated with someone else, they'll like write their name with hearts on it. So SEALs will often draw Ranger tabs because they because they think about what could have been. So yes, that's exactly right. That's the Ranger tab. You get that for graduating from Ranger School.
School,
Ranger
right?
School being, again, not administratively affiliated with the 75th Ranger Regiment,
Right.
which is the scroll. That's what we call it. You were talking about,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
Ranger School is open to anyone from the Army. It is primarily a leadership school,
Okay.
that has a Ranger
Gotcha.
name. The scroll is our unit patch essentially, and
Right.
it's black and it's red, and it'll have and it's a scroll, and it'll in the full color version,
Yeah.
and it'll say like what battalion you're from, so first, second, third, or RSTB. Nowadays, there's an intelligence battalion that was added, so it'll say MIB, so like Men in
Gotcha.
Black, I guess. But and then it says Ranger on there. So a fully qualified Ranger leader would have the Ranger tab, so the gold
Right.
tab, and then underneath it have the scroll, the black
Right.
and and yeah, and it's unique in that it is the only unit patch that looks like that. So
Right.
everything else is like triangles and squares and circles. It's very unique, and it's also unique in that because the Ranger Regiment has a selection process that even the support personnel have to go through, in the Army, or at least, um, you pretty much have to be you pretty much have to be in the unit to receive that. So if you
Yeah.
ever look at Army folks, if you look at their two sleeves, they may have something called a combat patch, which they
Hmm.
wear on their right shoulder. They call it a combat patch. It's called the I can't remember exactly what it's called. You don't necessarily have to be in ground combat to receive it. You have to be in like a hostile area So you could have to be deployed in a zone where combat, I guess, is possible or something like that, to be able to receive it. Well, the rules are very loose around what it takes to
Yeah.
receive that patch. So if you're from a different unit attached to the First Infantry Division, for instance, like your unit patch could be something different, but because you spent a few weeks hanging out with the First Infantry Division, you get to wear the First Infantry Division patch on your arm.
Right.
In that case, you probably earn two patches. So you'd have your unit patch and then you could wear that. But the Ranger Regiment doesn't have that many non-organic support enabler folks.
Mhm.
So there's only one group I can think of, which are from the civil affairs. There is a civil affairs unit, I think, that is primarily tasked with, at my time, again, tasked with working with Rangers. So those are folks who wouldn't be Rangers who would have a combat scroll.
Mhm.
But otherwise, like if you see a scroll, they most certainly have been assigned to the unit past RIP RASP and have been assigned to the unit and deployed. So,
Cool.
but yeah, but that's the difference. So that's sort of like the thing that distinguishes us. The Rangers don't have a cool badge, a cool little badge that's
Right.
specific to us. Um, in any way, shape, or form. The Green Berets, the Special Forces, they have a Special
Yeah.
Forces tab.
Yeah,
Um,
to the little lightning bolts and the blue,
mhm.
like looks like a tomahawk kind of, or
Exactly.
a
That would be the
arrowhead.
group. Yep, that would be the
Mm.
group patch. That tab that they have would be is specific to them as an individual. So it's
Right.
not affiliated with the unit. So
Yeah.
if they and it happens sometimes if you're a sergeant major in the special forces and you decide that you're going to make the army career, well now you got to go be a sergeant major at a division. Well, if you're at the 1st Infantry Division, you would still wear your special forces
Mm.
qualification tab and people would know that you were a Green Beret, right? You were a
Yeah.
Green Beret operator. Just like for you, Steve. Steve was a SEAL. Then later on, Steve went on to work as a chaplain. He
Yeah.
continued to have the
Yeah.
SEAL badge that identified that that he had gone through that and qualified. In terms
You
of
know,
like, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say it's interesting because there were chaplains that didn't want me to wear it. I think it was jealousy. And they said, you're a non-combatant now, you're a chaplain, you shouldn't be wearing that. And I said, well, I threw it back to him. I'm like, okay, I'm open to that. So do I take, okay, I take it off my uniform. Do I take my jump wings off? And they're like, well, I guess, yeah. Because it's your pedigree. It's just
Mhm.
like it's just like wearing your curriculum vita on your
Right.
uniform. And then they said, well, yeah, I guess so. I said, do I take my combat action ribbon off? And they're like, well, do I take my Southwest Asia service ribbon? It's like, where do I stop? I mean,
Right.
you want me to just strip my uniform clean? Or do you want me to erase my record? But it's just interesting how these these weird things in military culture can lead to, I don't know, just kind of crazy discussions. But yeah,
It would seem to me, and I think to most, I think the standard answer would be, if anything, it would make interactions with you, um, people may be more interested in seeking you out knowing that you had a different background. If it was just even if it was just purely like, they were
yeah,
just curious, right?
right,
What's the deal with this chaplain that's a
yeah,
SEAL?
yeah,
What's going on here? Let me talk to this guy. And
yeah,
and let's be honest, young kids who join the military, they may not sign up to do special operations work. They may do something else. But if you're in the military at some level that piques your interest,
yeah,
right? Like you join the military. There's got to be a little warrior spirit in you somewhere.
yeah,
And if you
yeah,
saw, a Ranger chaplain who was a Ranger, a SEAL chaplain who was a SEAL, Green Beret, whatever. I mean, you've got to be interested and you've got to be, oh, cool. I'm going to talk to this guy,
yeah,
talk
yeah.
to him, guy or gal. So what, what were we talking about? We were talking about, okay,
We're all over the
where I was
map.
going to get is like the range. So for the
Yeah,
Rangers now, the Rangers we don't have our own unique badge that says this person was 100% in the
right.
75th Ranger Regiment. The tab means you have the tab. There are a lot of people who are in the conventional military, conventional army who never spent a day in the Regiment. They have the Ranger tab.
Mm-hmm.
If you're at my time, everyone went to combat multiple times. So combat scroll would be one of the ways you could tell you were actually in the regiment. on your dress uniform, you could wear the distinctive unit insignia signifying that you were part of the unit. We don't have a cool badge. We do have, the Army loves its berets, and we love all our merit badges. We love our badges, but we love our berets too, French chic. So the Rangers used to have a black beret,
Right.
but at my time, it already transferred to the tan beret, which I always thought was cool because the SAS wore tan
Yeah.
berets. I was like, all right, cool, like commando color beret. Um, but again, if you go outside of the Ranger Regiment or outside of the Ranger unit, you got to go back to that other the beret of the unit you're in. So and same goes for Green Berets even. So you can have Special Forces folks who leave the Special Forces Command to go work at a conventional unit. They're not wearing a Green Beret. I'm
Right.
99% sure of that.
Right.
Someone on the internet could probably correct me, end up
Yeah.
correcting me, but I'm 99% of that. But
Some 12-year-old will correct you
some
from Boulder,
12-year-old,
Colorado.
they will. They will, and that's okay 'cause that's what the internet's
Yeah. Yeah.
for. So, yeah, so when we were talking about RIP, going back to RIP, I
Yeah.
wrote down some just random things that stuck out in my mind about that time. Again, for me, it was 4 weeks. It is not the transformative experience that I think Buds is to SEALs or that SFAS even might be to, although I think SFAS might be more along the same lines. It's something that was tough, but it
Mhm.
isn't it isn't like a big it isn't like a huge life accomplishment because it's short. It's
Yeah.
relatively short, and then it's very quickly overshadowed by other things you got to do. I think for Green
Right.
Berets, probably the Q course is probably that big thing. For Rangers, surviving your year as a private and then and graduating from Ranger school, I think that's like the bigger moment. For
Hmm.
example, a buds class you're in. Unless
Yeah.
I broke out my certificate, I have no clue what my class number was for RIP.
Right.
It just didn't have that significance for me. But I can tell you, what my Ranger school class was.
Hmm.
So 06, 07. So like that trying to like help compare the two
Yeah.
experiences. But here's just some things that you mentioned in buds that I thought that I saw in my experience. And this is at RIP, but this is kind of at other places as well. So first you had swim buddies, we had Ranger buddy. So you don't go anywhere alone. Um, there was also a no walking rule. You can't walk anywhere. If you're going
Yeah.
somewhere, you're running. Now, for us, what that looked like was more like a fast walk, like a trot. So you're just kind of like shuffling, kind of like airborne
The
shuffling
airborne
everywhere.
shuffle. Yeah. I was gonna say it used to
Airborne
kill
shuffle
us at
everywhere.
airborne school because we're like, we can't run this slow. How's
It's
this
worse.
possible? It's hurting our knees. Yeah, it
It's
was.
actually worse. Yeah, the airborne shuffle is actually worse than if you actually just stretched
Right.
your legs out more and ran. It's actually more painful, 100%.
Yeah. It was killing us. Anyway, sorry.
In terms of like how you're looking, so at our time we were in RIP, so we were called Rippies. Like,
Uh-huh.
and I would end up getting stationed there at Third Ranger Battalion there at Fort Benning. So like you'd see the guys come through, and the way you would tell that they're Rippies was just the looks on their faces, the general misery, but also they'd have clean uniforms, and then they would have a two court. They'd have like the old school two court with like the strap going off
Yeah.
to one side, and then they would have something we called a yoke, which was the strand of rope, and you'd have to have it crossing
Yeah.
the other side.
I remember seeing this at Benning. Yeah.
So that's how you could tell a rippy. Now, I don't remember if we actually had a knot tying requirement in RIP. I just don't remember. It doesn't stick out to me. But traditionally, knots like rope
Mm.
skills has been a huge thing with Rangers, right? They climb the cliffs of Point de Hawk. Like it's like a big thing for Rangers,
Yeah. It's a big
mountaineering.
thing for SEALs too. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Um, so there's another thing in common. So, but it was part of the uniform, and so you'd always have like this piece of rope with you,
Yeah.
that showed who you were.
Could you also make a Swiss seat out of it if you had to, like a hasty Swiss seat?
I made a Swiss seat in basic training. You did it when you
Yeah.
did rappelling. We did no rappelling in RIP.
Uh,
In Ranger school, you do a lot of knots. Knots
yeah.
are huge in Ranger school. Um,
Anyway,
Uh,
sorry, I
no,
get
I'm
you.
just doing random things. So we're kind of at a random phase here. No, these are good questions. I have a note here: spear tackling. So I knew so this is how I knew, there was a moment where I knew that I had left TRADOC, which is how someone from the army would explain the training environment, right? The training infrastructure set up by the big conventional army to churn out basically trained infantrymen, military intelligence folks, what have you, which is very structured. It's following a curriculum. I knew that I was in a different world, the special operations world. One of the things that stick out in my mind was just when you were getting hammered, when you were getting smoked. Like it very much felt like to me that it was like no holds bar. Like it was like there were no rules. It felt like it. Um, I remember a specific moment where we're getting smoked. We're getting someone like the cadre is asking questions, and we're in this little area. You would call it like a grinder. I don't even remember what we called it. But like we just had this small area, this courtyard, and there were these high fences around it, and and there were it was a chain link fence. Man, it was over 6 foot tall, so you couldn't see what was going on inside because they had like the covers covering the chain link fence. So you just hear
Right.
punishment going on. But I just remember there's this one instructor spear tackled some guy into the fence. So it got a little physical, and it
Yeah.
was a little bit physical at times. Um, uh, I won't say everything that I saw, but I saw it get a little physical.
Hmm.
Nothing that I would say that it definitely wouldn't fly in a training like a conventional training trade-off environment, but and nothing that looking back I think was too bad, but it definitely stuff that wouldn't fly in those type of environments. And that was one instance where I was like, okay, this place is different.
Yep.
And also, don't do what that guy did.
Yeah.
Don't do
Yeah.
what that guy
Right.
did.
If you could figure out what he did, in fact.
Like, yeah, I was too busy, like, yeah, sweat pouring into my eyes, like in a push-up position. Maybe that was his
Right.
first problem. Maybe it's the fact that we're supposed to be doing push-ups and he was standing up for some reason. Um,
Right.
I'll just say about the cadre in general. This was 2005. The Rangers jumped into Afghanistan in October, I think, of 2001. So the Rangers
Yeah.
had a presence in the war right from the get go. And by the way, would continue to have a presence even till I think today. They still maintain the streak. The way the Ranger Regiment deploys, there have been Rangers deployed in the combat areas non-stop, not a single day off for the Ranger Regiment since October of 2001,
Right.
rotating in and out. So no big deal. But those instructors were, things at the beginning of the Afghan of the war in Afghanistan. It was hit or miss
Hmm.
what the combat was like. But in 2003, I think it was April or March of 2003 when we invaded Iraq, it got real. It got
Yeah.
very real, and my instructors at the time in 2005 would have had one or two deployments under their belts, and what we were going to go into was very real also. And I think that their mentality and getting back to sort of the purpose of these discussions we're having, I think that in some ways they were dealing with a lot of stuff. And and when you
Oh
take
yeah.
those type of folks dealing with what they're dealing with and putting them in a training environment, you know,
Oh yeah.
they're dealing with things and they know what the stakes are. And and you know, they're
Well,
in an environment where they're attempting to express the consequence of what we were signing up for.
yeah. And another thing, to getting to the overall where we're going with an eye toward mental health and emotional intelligence and how to process all this physical stuff aside. I've always thought when I was 21, I was 21 years old. I was signing off. I mean, I was building what was called a rubber duck, a double duck, two Zodiac rating crafts with about 5,000 pounds of gear with these massive G12 cargo chutes. And I built this thing by myself. I'd get guys to help me with tying stuff. I had to build this thing. And it was fantastically complicated. Moreover, we're going to put this on a C-130 and it's going to roll out the back and we're going to jump out after it. I mean, I look back on that could drop an entire aircraft if it's not rigged, like it doesn't go flawlessly. You got major problems. And I'd have a platoon commander come up to me and goes, "Is it good to go, Watkins?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's ready." And my frontal lobe, as I understand from neuroscientists, they tell me my frontal lobe was not even fully developed at that stage. And I'm doing this stuff, and we're all doing this stuff, Rangers. We're going in, guys, I say we collectively, like the military, Fallujah, Ramadi, these hornet's nests. And it's like so far above our maturity level, some of the stuff we're asked to do. So yeah, you've got these guys coming home, and but they're probably, if I'm guessing right, some of these guys who are your instructors who've been in Fallujah and Ramadi are probably 24,
Yeah.
25.
Hmm.
Um, that's pretty darn young still, to be dealing with the level of incredibly complicated and stressful stuff. But anyway, and it's remarkable to me that we do as well as we do. I mean, our military, the American military machine is par excellence. There's nothing in the world that can even compare. I mean, it's
I
so
agree.
ridiculous. Yeah, but
Obviously, I am biased, but I, I think it's something in the American spirit, the
yeah,
culture. It's
yeah,
I think there's something in the water. I think
yeah,
it's something. Hopefully, we can maintain that.
yeah, yeah,
Hopefully, we can
absolutely. And
maintain that.
hopefully we can not fight. Well, I don't want to say this in any way that comes off as like, hopefully we can, if we have to fight, it's a smart war and we have defined objectives and we don't get bogged down destroying our own people, for generations, that are they're the best people in the world. There's this line from Platoon. I'll say this as we wrap up, that I'll never forget. It's Charlie Sheen, and he's writing to his grandmother, and he's telling her about the experience, and he said they come from all over the place. They're just from podunk places, and they're the best I've ever seen, Grandma. Like, they're really good at what they do, and I mean, it still gives me goosebumps that, yeah. And all of our military men, from you know conventional units to special ops guys, these guys and gals are just amazing. But
I agree. I think that's a good way to wrap this up. I would say we're at about the end of RIP. Looking through my notes here, I have a couple other things, but one thing I did want to mention was some of the testing. So there are physical events. Obviously, there are Ranger standards you have to meet. We could talk about that later because it comes up in when you're at when you get assigned to your company and pre-Ranger and Ranger school and all that. But specifically at RIP, what I thought was interesting was some of the written testing that happened, to include a history test. Um, so for the Rangers, our history is very important, and I think this is an area where I don't know. Did at any time were you ever tested on the history of the SEALs or or UDT?
I don't think so.
No.
Not that I remember.
So yeah, for us it was a pass fail event. I never had any issues with it. I always loved history,
Yeah.
and I did pretty well in school, but there's some folks there's some folks that had trouble, and folks have and I know some folk and I know of some folks who, that wasn't really, that wasn't really their thing, and they struggled with it. And people get recycled through RIP, through training, because of a history test. Um, so that's, and that can be tough. It can be tough if you pass all the physical stuff, but you can't remember, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
So, and then graduation, wrapping up the RIP part, you know, um, well, there was the last week of marksmanship. Not too much to say there. The last week, I did sense a difference when we got into week 4, the marksmanship phase, which is right before you graduate. Different instructors trying to accomplish something different. Um, taking us out to the range, going through rifle basics, And again, the tone was, "Hey, we're just trying to get you guys ready because some of you, depending on which unit which battalion you're going to, you may go overseas halfway through the rotation." And again, that's what would that's what would end up happening to me. I would graduate from RIP, great day, sunny day, throw your tambourine on, boom, you're a ranger. But again, like you said, like some of the glory is taken out of it because there's this next thing you got to go do, right? You're proud, you're happy, but it's a little empty because you're not done yet. You're not finished. You haven't
Yeah.
really you've accomplished just a piece of the process, and then I'd have to go to where I went, and I'll tell that when we talk about this next, I'll tell a story about how I ended up at third battalion versus the other two, but
That would be a significant difference, by the way, between SEALs and Rangers, because until we were fully qualified, we were not going to fire a weapon in combat. I mean, you had to go through, you had to, A to Z had to be completed, and then you went to a platoon and became a new guy, and then you would deploy. But they would never take a guy at some stage, through the about 2 year pipeline total for SEALs, and then send them there, and then they'd go back, and yeah. But anyway,
Yeah. No, I think we should pick up. I think that's where we should start
yeah,
next because I
yeah,
think I think that is a huge difference. And that's what I was kind of speaking to about, like, the pipeline for a ranger on paper after I graduated from RIP, technically I was a fully qualified ranger, right? And I was done, but in reality, and a lot of people know this, you're not done.
yeah,
The expectation is you get to your unit, you have to perform well. The Rangers will kick you out for anything.
yeah,
And
yeah.
we need to talk about that too, because I think that's unique in the special operations community. You're never a made man, so to speak.
Right,
You've
right.
never passed and you get to stick around regardless of what you do. They will kick you out for anything. And you got to
Interesting.
earn it every day. So I think
Wow.
that'd be another great place to
For
pick up, and we'll pick up with that in the next
sure.
one. So, um, again, thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch you in the next one. Appreciate it.